Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, there's never enough money? Have you ever felt like some people are just born lucky, while you seem stuck in a cycle that never changes? If so, then today's story is for you. Ava King was an artist, one of those who painted with all her heart but lived on empty pockets. She lived in a small apartment, struggling month after month to pay the bills, and no matter how much passion she poured into each canvas, recognition never came. Until one day, something inside her said, "What if it's not just about effort?" It was at that moment that everything began to change. Today, you'll learn about the real and inspiring journey of a woman who learned to use the power of her mind, gratitude, and visualization to completely transform her financial reality. And in the end, you might realize that the life you desire is also looking for you. By the way, before we begin, are you already subscribed to this channel? If not, take this moment to click the button, like it, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening to this inspiring story from. Let's dive into Ava King's transformation together. Ava King wasn't just any artist. Since she was little, she'd scribbled the world with different eyes, as if colors had voices and lines could tell secrets. She lived in a small apartment with peeling walls and a huge soul, where every corner hid an unfinished painting. Her talent was undeniable, but it never paid the rent. Her neighbors called her a dreamer, and dreamer to them was just another fancy way of saying no future. She painted with all her heart, but lived with empty pockets. Selling art was like throwing bottles into the sea. Sometimes someone would find them, but most of the time, they just floated silently. Ava worked odd jobs here and there, waitressing, serving, even teaching children's painting classes. At the end of the month, the balance was always the same: bills, exhaustion, and a deep sigh staring at the ceiling. Still, she didn't stop. Art was the only thing that kept her world going, even when everything around her seemed stagnant. There were days when she looked at her hands and wondered, is this talent truly a gift or a trap? Because she had talent, even the most critical knew that. But talent without recognition begins to hurt. With each exhibition that didn't sell, with each "I told you so" that never came back, Ava lost a little faith in herself. Still, something inside her, something small, insistent, refused to die. When night fell and the city fell silent, she would stand there, paintbrush in hand and hope between her fingers. It was in those moments that she felt art speaking to her, whispering things no one else heard. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was faith, but deep down, Ava believed there was a greater purpose to it all. She just didn't know when or how it would surface. And it was precisely in this scenario of doubts, worn brushes, and crushed dreams that something began to change. Not explosively, nor overnight, but like a light breeze that slips through the window unnoticed and little by little changes the air in the room. Ava's days were filled with bills piling up and never received responses. Every week she sent emails offering her paintings, posted on social media, and created promotions, but nothing seemed to work. Engagement was low, messages of interest disappeared out of nowhere, and the few sales that did come in barely covered the cost of the materials. It was like trying to light a fire with wet twigs. Meanwhile, Ava watched her fellow artists flourish, being invited to events, gaining recognition. Some didn't even seem as passionate as she was. This hurt her, not out of envy, but because she couldn't understand what she lacked. Comparison became a cruel, silent habit, and no matter how hard she tried to hide it, she wondered if the universe was truly listening to her prayers. At the end of each month, reality hit harder. The fridge was nearly empty. The credit card bill was exploding. The rent was looming. Sometimes she'd skip buying new paint to buy rice. And when she painted, she did it with pain, knowing her creation might never sell. It was hard to keep the faith when the world around her screamed otherwise. She tried to keep her smile, even when her eyes felt heavy. Feigning strength became routine. She told herself it was just a phase, that artists always faced difficulties in the beginning. But deep down, there was a weariness, a kind of exhaustion that couldn't be cured by sleep, but by purpose. And that purpose seemed increasingly distant. But it was precisely in this silent pit that a different spark began to emerge, a question that kept repeating itself quietly in her head. What if it's not just effort? What if it's about energy? In Ava's head, phrases seemed tattooed. Art is beautiful, but it doesn't pay the bills. Only those with connections can sell. Talent isn't enough. You have to be born in the right place. These ideas didn't come from nowhere. They were echoes of old conversations, from childhood, from school, from people who said they were just being realistic. But over time, these phrases became certainties. And certainties, when negative, become invisible cages. She didn't realize it, but these beliefs permeated everything. The words she chose, the decisions she postponed, the low prices she set for fear of scaring away clients. Ava diminished herself without realizing it, as if she were already expecting a no before trying. It was as if she had a dirty lens over her eyes. No matter how bright she shone on the inside, everything seemed opaque on the outside. And the worst part was, she thought this was humility. Many nights, Ava wondered why she was so afraid of growing up. There was something there, hidden, that was making her sabotage herself. Sometimes she declined invitations because she felt she wasn't ready yet. Other times she didn't even see them, as if her mind filtered out any opportunity before it even arrived. It was a silent, almost invisible cycle, but powerful enough to keep her always in the same place. And this place was comfortable in the cruelest sense of the word. Ava already knew her pain, knew exactly where it hurt. And this gave her a false sense of control. Dreaming big took more from her than enduring frustration. It was easier to say the world is unfair than to ask what inside me believes I don't deserve. But that question was beginning to surface. And when she finally dared to listen to that inner whisper, she realized that maybe it wasn't the world that needed to change first. Maybe it was the way she saw herself. It was an ordinary morning, gray, silent, almost empty. Ava woke to the sound of a notification, another automatic charge. Her bank account balance was in the red, and the last of the acrylic paint dried before she could finish the canvas. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands on her face, and cried. It wasn't a dramatic cry, it was a quiet, painful cry, like someone who no longer expects anything. In that moment, there was no art, no light, just a constant echo of, "It won't work." It was then that something inside her, tired of so much weight, whispered softly, "What if you're wrong about all this?" It was strange. The question seemed to come not from her mind, but from her heart. A strange warmth crept up her spine, as if that simple thought had opened a crack in the darkness. She took a deep breath. For the first time in days, Ava stood, walked to the bookshelf, and picked up an old book she'd been given years ago, a title about the power of the mind. She'd never read it. That day she opened a random page and came face to face with the phrase, "You attract what you believe you deserve." It hit her like a lightning bolt, and for the first time she stopped crying, not out of relief, but out of shock. Had this been the case all along? She couldn't explain it, but something shifted there. It was as if an invisible veil had been lifted from her eyes. Everything looked the same on the outside, the messy room, the smell of paint, the empty refrigerator. But inside, a spark had been lit. And with that spark came the silent decision. Either I change the way I see my life, or nothing will truly change. And so it was, in the midst of chaos and without an audience, that Ava took her first step into a new world, a world she didn't even know she could create. That same week, while scrolling through her phone for distraction, Ava stopped at a random video. It was a short, simple clip where a woman spoke with a sparkle in her eyes. You don't have to see it to believe it, you have to believe it to see it. The phrase echoed in her mind like a hypnotic refrain. Unable to explain why, Ava watched the entire video, then another, then another. Something was awakening. Curious, she began to research it further. She read articles, watched interviews, and even found forums where people shared how they'd changed their lives simply by changing their thoughts. It was the law of attraction, a name she'd heard before but never taken seriously. Only now it felt different. It wasn't about magic. It was about energy, intention, focus. It was as if someone had turned on a flashlight inside her. The deeper she delved, the more she realized how much she had been vibrating with scarcity, doubt, and pain. She began to recognize the pattern of thought she harbored every day. I can't do it. This isn't for me. It never works. It was as if, unintentionally, she was sending signals to the universe that she didn't deserve to prosper. And suddenly, everything made sense. It left her somewhere between frightened and amazed. She still didn't understand everything, but she felt she had to try. For the first time, Ava realized she could choose what to believe, and that, in itself, was liberating. She decided to dive into the subject, but without rushing, without anxiety. It was like learning a new language, the language of the mind, the heart, and the intention. And the more she learned, the more she saw possibilities where before she only saw walls. And so, with a book in her hands and an open heart, Ava began to write a new story, a story that was still blank, but with the certainty that this time she would be the author. Even as she immersed herself in this new world, Ava couldn't help but chuckle occasionally. Thinking positively and imagining positive things changing your life. It sounded like the kind of talk someone would never have had a hard time of. In her head, that practical sense still echoed. If it were that easy, no one would be broke. It was hard to accept that what she thought had so much power. After all, she'd always thought so much, and nothing changed. But even with her suspicions, there was something there that kept her going. It was as if two voices were fighting inside her, one telling her it was nonsense, the other whispering, "What if it's true?" This doubt was uncomfortable, but also curious. And the truth is, no matter how much she tried to resist, Ava couldn't ignore the small hope that was beginning to blossom. It was discreet, but insistent. She began to experiment. Small things. She began to be grateful for the hot coffee, for the morning light streaming through the window, for an unexpected compliment. Deep down, she still found it all a bit forced, a bit theatrical, but she kept trying, and she realized that just by trying to see things from a different perspective, the day seemed less burdensome. The resistance was there, but now it shared space with a new sensation, lightness. Still, in difficult times, the old thought returned, "This is nothing but an illusion." At such times she almost gave up, but something inside her, perhaps the very desire to change, held her back. She kept watching videos, reading stories, trying to understand herself. And each time doubt arose, she remembered, staying the way she is also a choice, and I already know how that ends. So Ava decided that even without 100% belief, she would keep trying, because, in the end, doubting change had never helped. Maybe believing, even without proof, was the only path she hadn't really tried yet. It was on one of those nights, when her mind wouldn't stop, that Ava decided to try something simple. Write down 3 things she was grateful for. It seemed silly, almost childish, but it was what they said in books, in videos, in the stories of game changers. So she grabbed an old notebook, scribbled with dried ink, and wrote, "For the roof that covers me, for the art I can still create, and for waking up today." At first it was difficult. Her mind wanted to complain, wanted to list what was missing, but Ava persisted. On the second day, she wrote 3 more. For the hot coffee, for the breeze through the window, and for the compliment I received yesterday. A few words, but something changed. It was as if, as she wrote, she was saying to herself, "I still have reasons to believe," and that was enough to calm her chest. Over time, the habit became a sacred ritual. Before bed, even when tired, Ava would open her notebook and record small blessings of the day. They weren't grandiose achievements, they were details. A beautiful sunset, a new idea, a laugh that escaped from nowhere. And little by little her world began to seem less grey. It was the same scenario, but now with a light on inside, something curious began to happen. The more she gave thanks, the more she noticed things to be thankful for. It was as if the lens of life was shifting. The pain was still there, yes, but it was no longer everything. Gratitude provided contrast, gave form, and for the first time, Ava felt that maybe, just maybe, she could live with more than just effort. And so, between simple pages and honest words, Ava silently laid the foundation for a new reality, a reality that could not yet be seen in the mirror, but which was already growing strong in her heart. It was on an ordinary day that Ava noticed the first thing that was different. She was walking down the street when a woman stopped and said, "Your hair looks beautiful today." A simple compliment, but one that warmed her heart. She smiled, thanked him, and thought, "I can't remember the last time I heard something like that from a stranger." That same day, a new follower commented on an old post, "You have a soul in your paintings." The following week, one of her paintings, which had been forgotten online, sold. No discount, no negotiation. The buyer said he felt a connection with the work. Ava was in shock. That almost never happened. It wasn't the money that shook her, but the fact that someone, somewhere, had sensed something from her. It was as if the universe was slowly responding. These small things became messages. A symbolic photo from a friend, saying, "Believe in yourself." An invitation to participate in a local art fair. A compliment from an old teacher, out of the blue. Ava began to see meaning in things that had previously gone unnoticed. She began to feel she was no longer alone on this journey. Something was changing, and it was coming from within. The curious thing is that she hadn't done anything big yet. She hadn't moved house, gone viral, or appeared on TV. But the way she felt about the world was different. It was as if the universe was silently saying, "I see you changing." And this recognition, however subtle, was worth more than any trophy. It was then that Ava understood, the energy shifts first, and the rest comes later. It was one sunny morning, while sipping coffee and looking out the window, that Ava decided to try something new. She closed her eyes and imagined herself in a gallery, her canvases hanging on white walls, illuminated by soft spotlights. People stopped in front of them, stared, and were moved. She saw herself there, in a corner, smiling silently, feeling such peace that her heart beat differently. For a few seconds it felt real. At first it was strange. Her mind wanted to interrupt with phrases like, "That will never happen," or "That's just an illusion." But she persisted. Every day, for a few minutes, she imagined the subscription sold, the full opening, the invitation from an art publisher. She smelled the wine, the sound of conversation, the emotion in the eyes of those who viewed her works. It wasn't just thinking, it was living it with her heart. Ava learned that visualizing it wasn't enough in her mind's eye. She had to feel it in her body, so every time she imagined success, she truly smiled. Her chest opened, her shoulders relaxed, and a gentle joy filled her day. It was like rehearsing her soul for when it all became real. And the more she did, the more she connected with the woman she wanted to be. This exercise became her sacred moment. Before sleeping or upon waking, she would visit the future. A future where art wasn't a struggle, it was a celebration, where recognition was natural, not a miracle. And little by little, this future began to seem more possible. Visualization ceased to be a distant dream and became almost a memory of what was yet to come. And that's when she began to notice, the clearer the image, the more the real world began to align with it. Not everything was a straight line, Just when Ava thought things were taking off, life decided to test her faith. The electricity bill was higher than expected. The refrigerator was almost empty again, and a customer cancelled a large order at the last minute. It was as if the universe was asking, "Do you still believe, even now?" And the answer took a while to come. Doubts returned like old, unwelcome friends. Is this all really real? What if I'm just fooling myself? Silently, Ava wept in the bathroom, feeling that old weight on her shoulders. The visualization felt distant, the gratitude forced, and all she wanted was a sign, just one, that she was on the right path. But that day, no sign came. Still, she took a deep breath. She picked up her gratitude notebook and wrote, with a trembling hand, "Thank you for still having the strength to carry on." It wasn't much, but it was something. Then she lit a candle and painted. She painted with anger, with pain, with love, because even in the midst of chaos, she knew, giving up on what she was building inside her would be like extinguishing a flame, lit with so much effort. Little by little, she understood that the ups and downs were part of life, that it wasn't about pretending everything was fine, but about choosing to believe, even when it wasn't. Her faith wasn't blind, it was courageous. And in that cycle of losses and small victories, Ava developed something more powerful than talent: resilience, a strength that welled up from the soul, even when the body was tired. And it was in this back and forth between shadow and light that she began to understand the real meaning of aligning herself with what she desired. It was on a day of inner silence that Ava finally understood. It wasn't enough to wish for something beautiful. She had to live as if it were already true. The change wasn't just in what she wanted, but in who she was. If she continued to feel fear, doubt, guilt, that was what she would send out into the world. The key was to keep her heart steady, even when her eyes saw otherwise. Vibration was more than emotion. It was a daily choice. So Ava began to treat her dreams as realities in the making. She stopped saying, "If I ever get recognized," and started saying, "When I do." She changed the way she walked, talked, even dressed. It wasn't arrogance. It was preparation, a way of saying to the universe, "I already feel ready. I'm just waiting for the moment to align with it." And this attitude, however subtle, changed everything. She learned to observe herself. When bad thoughts came, she didn't feed them. She let them pass, like clouds. When her energy dipped, she sought out music, painting, silence, or movement. Anything that reconnected her to the frequency of what she desired. It was like tuning a radio. If she wanted to hear something different, she had to change the internal station, and this practice became her new normal. It wasn't perfection, it was awareness. Sometimes she slipped, yes, but she knew how to get back on track. She knew what to do to get back on track. And more than that, she began to understand that what she wanted was already on its way. She just needed to find it vibrating at the same frequency. It was like a date with the most prosperous version of herself, and she could already feel it approaching. It was like this, without fanfare, but with intention, that Ava began to live not by what she saw, but by what she believed was already hers. It was on a rainy afternoon, the kind Ava used to paint while listening to soft music, that something unexpected happened. Her phone vibrated, an Instagram notification. A verified profile had tagged her in a post. He was a well-known art curator, one Ava had been following silently for years, only admiring from afar. He had reposted one of her works with the caption, "Souls that paint the invisible." Ava froze. She read it 3 times to make sure it was real. That screenshot, which she'd almost never posted, was now in front of thousands of people. Within minutes, followers began to grow. Messages of praise arrived. Invitations poured in. But most powerful of all was the feeling of recognition. It was as if the universe was saying, "I saw every effort you made, and now others will see it too." She didn't know how he'd found her profile. Maybe someone had sent it. Maybe it was the algorithm. Maybe it was energy. It didn't matter. The fact was, in that moment, Ava understood what the book said about letting the universe choose the how. She'd done her part, the rest had been delivered. And now, something that seemed impossible was happening before her eyes. But the most beautiful thing was how she received it, with gratitude, not despair, with calm, not fear, because deep down she had been visualizing this very thing for weeks. The image of recognition, of her name being remembered, of her art touching other hearts. When the moment arrived, she embraced it naturally, like someone recognizing an old promise being fulfilled. And so, on an ordinary day that became extraordinary, Ava took a firm step toward what had previously been just a dream. And the universe kept watching. After that momentous event, Ava felt something new, confidence. But not the forced confidence of someone pretending everything is fine. It was a serene, almost silent surrender. She realized that when she let go of the need to control how things would unfold, the universe began to act creatively. It was as if, by letting go of anxiety, she made room for the flow of life. Ava stopped desperately chasing. She began to act lightly, knowing that every step counted, but that not everything needed to come from effort. She did her part with love, then took a deep breath and let it out. She stopped obsessively checking the numbers, the responses, the likes. She began to trust the seed she planted more than the rush of the harvest. That changed everything. In moments when the old urgency tried to return, she reminded herself, if I believe it's already mine, why am I doubting it now? This question became an anchor, a reminder that the universe doesn't fail those who vibrate at the right frequency. She learned that detachment isn't abandonment, it's trust in motion. And this faith kept her walking with her feet on the ground and her heart in the clouds. Ava began to enjoy the process more. Each canvas she created was a prayer, a dance with the invisible. Each day was an opportunity to align herself more closely with the life she desired. She didn't need to force anything. Everything that was hers was coming, and in its own time, this peace, which had previously seemed unattainable, now lived within her, and that was worth more than any outcome. And it was in this active peace, in this balance between action and surrender, that Ava began to receive not only recognition, but signs of something even greater approaching. As the days passed, something in Ava began to shine differently, and it wasn't just on the outside. It was in her eyes, in her way of speaking, in the way she entered a room. She no longer hid behind screens or apologized for existing. Her presence now had a firmness, but a light firmness, of someone who knows who she is, without needing to prove anything. It was as if she had finally returned home within herself. Her art changed too. Her lines were looser, more vivid. The colors screamed what had previously been stuck in her throat. She painted with joy, without worrying about whether anyone would buy it, without fear of pleasing anyone. She created because she loved it, and that love overflowed. People felt it. They said her works had soul, that they carried something hard to explain, and that for Ava was everything. Before, she painted with anxiety in her chest. Now, with gratitude in her hands. Each new painting was a celebration of the freedom she felt. No more fear of rejection, no more critical voice whispering, "What if no one likes it?" She liked it. She approved. And that was enough. The confidence growing within her was silent, but firm, like the roots of an old tree. Even her conversations with friends changed. Ava talked more about her own projects, smiled when sharing her ideas. She no longer shrank. She no longer diminished her dreams to fit into the comfort of others. She recognized herself in every word, and this recognition was liberating, because deep down, all she ever wanted was to feel enough. And now, she did. And it was in this state of presence, acceptance, and inner strength that she began to attract even more than she imagined. It was as if a door had opened, and behind it, dozens more were waiting. In less than a month, Ava received invitations she'd previously only dreamed of in silence. A courier from another city wanted to present her work to a group show, an art podcast, contacted her to interview her. A paint brand proposed a partnership, all at once, and she could only smile, grateful and surprised. These proposals didn't come through insistence. They came through magnetism. It was as if the world was now responding to the new energy she emitted. Ava no longer needed to chase, she attracted. Of course, she still took her work seriously, but it was no longer about striving. It was about flowing. What once seemed unattainable now came naturally. She saw her name in catalogs, received praise from people she never imagined reaching, and the curious thing was how this didn't make her arrogant. It made her humble, moved. She knew where she had come from. She knew how many times she thought about giving up. She knew how many times she doubted. So each new opportunity was a gift, not a trophy, but a reminder that she chose to keep going. Ava began traveling with her art. Small towns, big cities, alternative spaces. In each place, someone connected with a part of her. People cried in front of the paintings, saying they felt hope, courage. That was it. That was it all the time. It wasn't just about selling paintings. It was about touching lives, and that now happened frequently. And in the midst of this expansion, a gentle feeling took hold of her, that this was still just the beginning. Ava no longer counted the days as she used to. The end of the month, which used to come with dread, now arrived with gratitude. Sales began to happen frequently, as if the works had found their owners at the right time. Clients appeared from other states, even from abroad. A collector from Spain acquired 3 paintings at once. She took a deep breath and thought, it's happening. The money coming in was no longer for survival, it was for growth. Ava was able to invest in new materials, set up a small, better lit studio, and renovate that corner of the apartment that had previously been a makeshift space. Each achievement was celebrated with humility, because she remembered every time she painted with diluted paint, just to keep creating. Now she had abundance, but the most beautiful thing wasn't the number in her bank account, it was her lightness. The way she woke up smiling, without the anguish of wondering, what am I going to do now? Life seemed to dance with her. Opportunities no longer came laden with tension. They came as natural gifts, and she received them with an open heart, like someone who understands she deserves them. Social media grew, invitations increased, and her art began to cross borders. An international art website wrote a moving review of her works. Ava King transforms silence into color. She read it aloud, tears in her eyes. Not even in her wildest dreams had she anticipated something like this. But somehow, she felt it was all already written in her heart. And it was there, in the midst of this sweet and unexpected flow, that Ava realized thriving was in fact allowing herself to flourish. One day, Ava received a message unlike any other. It was from a young woman from rural Brazil who said, "Your art saved me from a sadness I couldn't even explain." Ava read it silently, her eyes welling with tears. More than a blindfold, more than a compliment, here was true return. Her work was touching souls, and that was immeasurable. Other messages began arriving. People said they'd started painting because of her, that they'd found the courage to change careers, that they'd started believing in themselves again. She evaluated each word carefully, like someone receiving letters from the universe. She realized that without planning it, she'd become a beacon. Her light helped others light theirs. Recognition now wasn't just from critics or the market. It was about life, about intertwined stories, awakened emotions, and hearts that beat along with the paintings. She understood that art was just the conduit. The purpose was much greater. It was about connection, about awakening, about reminding people that there's beauty even on cloudy days. This filled Ava with a feeling she hadn't known: completeness. Not that momentary sense of euphoria, but a deep peace, as if she had found her place in the world. She no longer sought to prove anything to anyone. She knew who she was. She knew what she did, and most importantly, she knew why she did it. And that made everything make sense. And it was in this state of plenitude that she began to feel that the cycle was closing, only to open an even bigger one, sitting on the studio floor, surrounded by canvases and paint splatters. Ava took a deep breath. She looked around and remembered the first time she doubted herself. She remembered the gratitude notebook, the shy visualizations, the tears hidden in her pillow. So much had changed on the outside, but what truly transformed her life was something no one saw, what she chose to feel, what she chose to believe. She understood that reality doesn't change from the outside in. It's the other way around. When she changed her thoughts, she changed her frequency. When she changed her frequency, she changed what she attracted. It wasn't magic, it was clarity. It was presence. It was the courage to look within and reorganize what she kept repeating without realizing it. Ava discovered that the mind is a tool and that she'd spent years leaving it on autopilot. Now she realized how connected everything was. Every doubt she faced, every small act of faith, every deep breath, it all played a part. It was like putting together an invisible puzzle where the pieces came with the right emotion, and she fit them together one by one, even without seeing the final design. Today, looking back, she saw that it was never about luck. It was about synchronization. The external change was just a reflection. The real revolution happened within, and that's what she most wanted people to understand. It wasn't just about goals, achievements, or fame. It was about becoming someone capable of living the life she wanted, and in doing so, creating not just art, but reality. Because Ava didn't attract a new life, she built it, choice by choice, thought by thought. And in that reflection, gentle as the wind that passes through the window at the end of the afternoon, Ava understood that she had never been waiting for a miracle. She was preparing herself to deserve it. If Ava could sit down with someone, eye to eye, she would say, "You don't have to have it all right now. You just have to believe you can." Because that's what changed everything for her. The day she stopped waiting for something external to happen and started changing from within. It wasn't luck, nor a miracle, nor a sponsorship. It was a choice, a daily choice to align thought, feeling, and action. She believed that anyone, anywhere could do the same. It doesn't matter if you paint pictures, sell cakes, dream of starting your own business, or don't even know what you love to do yet. The energy you emit begins to create the path. And when you believe you deserve it, the world begins to agree with you. That's what she learned. Reality listens to your vibration. Of course, there are difficult days. Of course, fear strikes. But what Ava discovered is that you don't have to be perfect to begin. You just have to be willing to observe your thoughts, to choose new words, to treat yourself with more kindness, because the life you want doesn't come when everything is resolved. It comes when you begin to align with it, even without proof. Ava said that the greatest art she created wasn't on any canvas. It was in the way she lived, and no one can take that away. You can lose things, status, likes, but what you build inside, with truth, remains, and that's what transforms lives. An energy from the inside out, a firm and loving decision to change what you accept as truth. And when this change happens, the invisible begins to move, and the impossible becomes just another beautiful story to tell. Ava walked through a brightly lit gallery, where her works now took center stage. But more than the paintings, what filled that space was something invisible, the journey. Each brushstroke carried a memory, a triumph, a moment when she almost gave up. And now, it was all there, exposed not only to the eyes, but to the hearts of passers-by. It was art, but it was also life. She remembered the girl who cried in the dark room afraid of the bills, the woman who wrote gratitude even though she didn't know why. And she looked at herself now, firm, at peace, grateful even for what hurt, because she understood that everything was part of the polishing process. That gold doesn't shine without fire, and that the universe when it sees someone willing to change within, responds with generosity. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about applause. It was about finding herself again, about saying yes to herself, about allowing the light that had always existed within her to finally have room to expand. And in the reflection of the glass, before one of her works, Ava saw something she hadn't seen in a long time: completeness, a kind of beauty that comes from a soul at peace with its own story. Some would say she won because she persisted, others because she believed, but Ava knew the truth. She won when she stopped waiting and started vibrating, when she traded doubt for presence, control for confidence, when she decided to be the first person to see her own worth, even before the world realized it, and that was the biggest turning point. Ava didn't just sell her works, she sold the old belief that it was impossible, and the universe bought it. And maybe that's the true art of life. Discovering that you can create the reality you want, just like Ava created hers. Because the change didn't start when she sold her first painting. It started when she believed she deserved to sell. It started when she looked inside and decided to align her thoughts, emotions, and actions with what she wanted to live. Ava King shows us that prosperity isn't just about numbers, it's about energy. It's about knowing that the universe responds to what you put out, not just what you wish for, and that you don't need to have everything right now to get started. You just need to start aligning with who you want to become. So if this story touched something deep inside you, don't ignore it. Maybe it arrived at exactly the right time. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us on this journey of transformative stories. And remember, you're not here by chance.